Oh, hello, I don't need a haircut, you need a haircut. And if you're wondering why it took so long to get to Metroid Prime 3, then you should have watched the update video I uploaded at the start of January. You fake fan. So here we are, the end of the Metroid Prime trilogy, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. Developed as the final chapter of the Prime series, so Retro Studios wanted to make this game the biggest Prime game we've seen yet.
God damn it.
And while they had to dial it back a bit when they saw how weak the Wii was compared to their expectations, Prime 3 definitely builds a lot on everything from the last few games. It's got action-packed sequences, full voice acting even though Samus doesn't have much to say apparently, detailed environments, puzzles involving your ship, and multiple planets to explore like in Hunters. And of course, because it's a Wii game, you control it using this dead rat I found. But Retro took care to make sure it didn't suck. The game would be delayed in order to fine-tune the control and fit the functions of 7 buttons, 2 joysticks, and a D-pad into these. I've never played Prime 3, in fact I know next to nothing about it in general. Obviously it's going to use the motion controls and the Wii Remote's pointer, but the most experience I have with this control style is like the 10 minutes of footage I recorded for my last re-releases video. So, starting up Prime 3, it definitely takes some getting used to. The controls in the last 2 games were clunky central, but they got the job done. Here, it's in some weird limbo in between being way smoother and arguably the best way to play these games, and being super disorienting. I think when aiming at anything that's already on screen, it's super precise and fluid, but the moment something starts moving out of your line of sight and you have to turn or look up, it just gets a bit Moving the cursor to the edges just doesn't feel great. It's super easy to overshoot or lose track of what you were looking for, and it can be downright frustrating to try to lock onto a specific enemy, especially while trying to scan things. Sometimes it just straight up doesn't work, and it can even stop reading the pointer sometimes when you try to move it back on screen. I'd recommend making aiming easier by going into the settings and turning on the feature that locks the aim when locked on. By default it just locks the camera, but you still have free aim. This way you don't have to worry about your arm moving too much to aim. The only exception is bosses, and I kinda get it. Bosses all usually have multiple points you have to hit or attacks to shoot out of the air, so being able to stay locked on but freely aim makes sense. But it still doesn't feel the greatest. After a while though, you get a good handle on it, and thankfully they designed the game with this in mind. Precision isn't demanded of you, and while some parts can still suck, it's ultimately not a huge problem. Changing visors can be a bit clunky, but they're only 3, so it's not too big of a deal. I do think they go a bit overboard with the motion though. Again, nothing too far, but every little doodad makes you move the Wii Remote in some way, and it stopped being cool hours ago. Like, the intro is super cool, pushing all these buttons in your ship, moving the hand around, seeing what everything does. It's immersive, until you keep doing it and it becomes a little unnecessary. Like the grapple lasso, a new item you get early on lets you pull things towards you. You have to shake the nunchuck to shoot it and pull, which is cool the first few times or during combat. There are enemies you need to use this on, and it adds to the immersion, don't get me wrong, but sections like this? The game starts with Samus and a bunch of other bounty hunters we've never seen before, and spoiler, we'll never see again, meeting with the Admiral of the Galactic Federation. Admiral Dane tells us that these organic supercomputers that the Federation use, called Aurora units, are being hit with viruses and we need to go fix them. Which at first made me think, oh, looks like we have some more mother brains, but weirdly enough that doesn't end up being the case. Well, not really. Most of the Aurora units just need a good old turn them off and turn them back on. But during the meeting, space pirates ambush the ship and a nearby planet, so we all go down to stop them. While defending the planet Norian, we're told that a Phazon meter is on course to the planet, and we need to reach the defenses to destroy it. Ridley shows up to slow us down. It's fucking awesome, but it's also super easy to forget because other things quickly take precedent, such as right when we get to the defense system, Dark Samus appears and knocks everyone out, Samus using the last of her strength to save the planet. Samus wakes up a month later and a nurse tells her that she and the other hunters are now self-generating Phazon that for some reason isn't harming them. In fact, they gave her a new suit that lets her harness the power into a beam. I'm sure this won't go poorly. By the way, does anyone remember what happened when you so much as touched Phazon in the previous games? Now me personally, I would have tried to stop that from happening since Phazon has always been a bad thing. I get they're experimenting with it, and you can see Federation soldiers with Phazon enhanced weaponry, but they have external packs holding the Phazon. Surely trying to use the Phazon inside their bodies wouldn't be plan A. We know of 2 entire planets that were almost ruined by this stuff. And also, I wasn't asked. If it were up to me, I'd want that shit out of me by any means necessary, especially if I was Samus and was seeing firsthand how dangerous this shit can be. But instead, now we have a Phazon-induced hyper mode where our beam is insanely strong. Like seriously, this thing is deadly and obliterates anything looking down the barrel. You have to sacrifice an energy tank's worth of health to activate it, but it's pretty easy to refill, so you can just go nuts. Once we're up and about, instead of getting any medical leave, boy, I bet there's an insane lawsuit just waiting for Samus. We're asked to go find the other hunters who have gone missing. They're on planets that have been infected by meteors like the one headed for Norian, these Leviathan seeds. So we go from planet to planet looking for the other hunters, and learning that the seeds have brought Phazon and corrupted these planets. We get tasked with destroying the seeds, and on the way we find out that the other hunters have been corrupted by Dark Samus, and we have to put them down. I should probably feel worse about this, but I just met these guys today. I guess I'm a little bummed out. They seem like decent people. They were on our side at one point. But I couldn't tell you any of their names off the top of my head. Honestly, their inclusion and sudden boss fights and deaths just had me confused over what the hell was actually happening. Like, there's no way they made this whole character for 2 interactions and then I just killed them. I thought there'd be a revelation that those were Dark clones similar to Dark Samus heading in a massive fight where everyone takes on their counterpart. But no, they just die right here and I barely remember them. Except Gondrada, but that's only because at the end of the fight she morphs into Samus as she dies. That's fucked up. Also, this fight reminds me of Dark Samus 2 from Echoes. Yeah, it's mainly because of the elevator, but she does morph into Samus at one point. This all leads to the obvious revelation that, oh shit, I'm next. We were all hit with that stuff, and as the game goes on, Samus gets worse and worse. Early on, during a part where you have to use hyper mode, it goes nuts and overloads, with us being forced to shoot out all the excess Phazon through our beam. You can also get forced into this by an enemy hitting you with a Phazon attack. That's right, Haze stole this. Honestly, for a while I didn't really understand anything about hyper mode. I think the meter increases if you're not shooting, and if it's full too long you become corrupted. And if you're corrupted too long, or if the meter stays full, you get a game over. I think that's how it works. And it's clear why I never understood that, because, yeah, you're invincible while hyper mode and that's cool, but I don't pop this unless I'm planning on unloading the entire pack at once. I'm never not shooting, so the overloads are just when the game decides or an enemy hits me, and even then, it only ever lasts for a few seconds. And yeah, needing to lose health to use it does deter me a bit at the start, but by the end I had more than enough health to do what I had to do, and I looked it up. You have to be a lazy bastard to die this way. To see if it had any side effects for overuse during one session, I was popping it all the time, and well, yeah, you can lose a lot of health if you're not being careful, but enemies drop loads of it, and often they all die before you burn the whole meter. This makes encounters a joke. You're showered in so many energy tanks that at a certain point, it makes less sense not to use hyper mode or anything that looks at you the wrong way, especially since enemies can also enter hyper mode, and if you don't also enter, they take forever to kill, so you're incentivized to just pop into hyper mode and obliterate anything in that general direction. And going back to the story aspect of it, who could have seen this coming? The highly dangerous and toxic substance in my body, that my body now produces, turns out to be dangerous. As Samus destroys the seeds from the core, being inside and fighting the bosses is slowly causing her corruption to worsen, but she has to keep on as the only bounty hunter who's not suddenly evil. Like, dude, get the hell off my car, I just paid that off! Eventually, Samus has to go to the space pirate homeworld, which has been corrupted by a seed, which probably explains why they're so dead set on defending the others. That or they just aren't content with one never-ending supply of Phazon and want more. But the pirate homeworld is so corrupted that the Federation is concerned that it's going to taint the rest of the universe. So naturally, we have to go deal with that bullshit. Once that crisis is dealt with, Samus and the Federation steal a Leviathan ship and are able to warp to the planet Phase. Alright, I'll give you one guess as to what's so special about this planet. It has a drive-thru? Phase is the source of all Phazon, so naturally, Samus does what Samus do. The Prime series has been a bit lacking in destroying planets, so I am so fucking ready. But before we can get there, there's some information and components we need from a wrecked ship called Valhalla. But in order to get anywhere while here, you need these energy cells. Yup, the endgame fetch quest is back. Wrong! Kinda. These things serve as the artifacts and Sky Temple keys in a sense that they're your final barrier before the end of the game, but you don't actually need all of them. There are 10 in total and you only need about 5, and I've seen some people say that you can get by with only 4. And you're gonna get a few just by basic exploration. Hell, some are required. I was getting them before I even knew what they were. I thought they were making hyper mode last longer or something, so thankfully they finally got it kind of right. You might need to go back for 1 or 2, but this is so much better than the last 2 games, thank God. I didn't realize I only needed 5 and accidentally went back for one I didn't need, and it happened to be the hardest one to get. Screw cell number 4. But it ended up working out because if you use one in the wrong place, you can't get it back. So if you only have 5, you need to be a bit careful with where you're placing them. Because phase is, well, entirely phase on, Samus is forced into a permanent hyper mode, which means that you have a time limit to get to the end. But you're in hyper mode, so nothing they throw at you is a remote threat. Honestly, I think I found the segment more tedious and annoying than stressful, tense, difficult, fun, engaging, challenging. Pick one of those words, whichever one you like best. You have a final matchup with Dark Samus and a corrupted Aurora unit, which are pretty easy fights because hyper mode isn't just a right, it's a law. Seriously, for the Aurora fight, there was a solid chunk where I just didn't know what the hell I was doing, and while I barely won before I ran out of time, I still did it first try. The planet is destroyed, seemingly wiping out all Phazon, meaning Samus is cured and Dark Samus can't return. So Samus flies off with someone following her. Apparently it's Salix from Hunters. I wouldn't have recognized it if I didn't look it up, but it makes sense with his appearance in Prime 4's trailer, I guess. And honestly, a fair bit of this game kind of reminds me of Hunters. Other bounty hunters being here and being boss fights, using the ship to travel between planets to complete various objectives on each one, and then you go into a separate area to fight the boss. I know that's only like 3 things, but if you were to consult this chart, I think Prime 3 might actually be a remake of Hunters. It's also pretty linear like Hunters, but it does a much better job at feeling open. The hint system is back, but this time it's not optional and is a little bit more intrusive. Now you're directly given objectives by Aurora units, and when one is done, they give you a new one and tell you where it is. A lot of it is still up to you to figure out, but now the help is unavoidable. Hell, you're reminded every time you boot the game up. Considering this game's structure, I'd rather have it this way than not have it at all. It's like Prime 2 in the way that each planet is a separate area that can be finished once you've gotten into the seed, but there's still something you have to go back for eventually, so they'll tell you right away the moment you need it, so you know exactly where to go and you don't waste time exploring the wrong planet. The spring ball has been added to the base moveset and it is a godsend. Using bulbs to jump doesn't take a lot of time, but being able to just flick the Wii remote is so much more convenient. The different planets are neat. I didn't get much out of the environments. They're different and unique, don't get me wrong, but so are the areas in Prime 1 and that was all one planet. And there are multiple areas that you need to use your ship to reach on each planet. Yeah, there are shortcuts, but sometimes you'll think you know how to reach something, but you could go to the wrong part of the planet and then you need to go all the way back to your ship. And I think it would have been better to keep each planet as just one big area with multiple landing points throughout, just for convenience sake. Getting around in general is just a bit more work than it should be, especially with how often there's only one correct way to get somewhere. I do like these planets. I think it's cool how they each have unique ways of finding their lore that I didn't read. And it's cool how all the doors are different, but sometimes they would refuse to open. This has happened in all 3 games. Sometimes you just need a little bit more time to load after you shoot the door. But man, I really felt it here, and way more often, and it's annoying when you're just trying to ignore enemies and run right to where you're trying to be. Lastly, I think the ship is honestly kind of lame, which is weird because you get upgrades for it, but I never once used it when it wasn't required. Partly because I'd rather stay in combat visor while in combat and not switch to ship mode, but mostly because I forgot that it even has missiles that you could theoretically use on enemies in the first place. There's this part where you need to make a bomb and use the ship to grab the pieces, but the ship can't at first, so you need to go get the upgrade, which is nearby, so it doesn't really lead to anything, it's just another place you have to go. It makes it a bit weird how little the ship is used, but it gets an entire visor for something super situational and pixelated. Holy shit, that's a bunch of dicks. This game takes a much more classic Metroid approach to the item upgrades. Visors are here like normal, but you only get 2 beams in the whole game when they stack, so there's no switching done at all. The plasma beam acts like normal. It's hot, not as powerful as it was in Prime 1, but it's a welcome return. The Nova beam ironically acts more like the classic plasma and wave beams, as it goes through objects to hit targets behind walls you can see with the X-ray visor. In fact, you can combine the X-ray and Nova beam to hit weak spots on enemies, making fights even easier than they were before. Ice missiles make a return from fusion, and I don't get a whole lot from them. That's not entirely fair. I use them as much as I use missiles, but things have a tendency of dying before they freeze, so I was never counting on that and just used them for damage. Also, there are no beam combinations either, which kind of makes sense considering trying to hit D-pad down while holding the A button on the Wii Remote while also making sure that you're aiming accurately in a game where you lose lock-ons frequently. I kinda understand to just omit that ability, especially if you're only gonna have one main beam throughout the entire game. You're already strong enough with Hyper Mode. No suit upgrades though, I can't really get behind that. I mean, you get the shield that protects you from acid rain, but that's all it does, and it doesn't even look that different, which is lame. The only problem it solves is one I didn't know I had until now. That's kinda how all the upgrades feel actually. Aside from a few times, most of the problems that are solved by an upgrade are basically absent until after you get it or right before. Like the ship hook for example, or the hazard shield, the x-ray visor, or even the Nova beam. I didn't get a feeling like, finally I can go back to that one part and get past it now. But instead, I often found uses I wasn't expecting, like the X-Ray Nova combo, or welding. As I mentioned, this game is easily the most linear of the trilogy, but it's still very rewarding to explore, and I think the general level design is great. There's not as much puzzle solving, a lot of roadblocks are solved by just shooting something or calling the ship to shoot something, but it's not a far cry from the previous games. There are a lot more action pieces though, onslaughts of enemies, sometimes unique objectives. These are pretty cool, but I think the design is still at its best when it's being subtle. Like the part where Metroid starts showing up. You go through knowing they're gonna break out at some point, but you need the Seeker launcher, which for the record is unchanged from last time, so I used it equally as much. But you need it, so you need to power down the place holding them yourself. And instead of them immediately breaking out and ambushing you, you just see the empty tanks and hear them moving, before they finally reveal themselves as annoying enemies that can phase through walls, which is a tactic I've been hating on since the Devil May Cry review. God, these things are annoying. I mean, thankfully, Hyper Mode. But I didn't understand that it wasn't risky to do that yet, so when they showed up I tried ice missiles, which can freeze them. Yeah, just like how I can win the lottery. But more often than not, they just let the missiles go right through them. Honestly, I'm surprised with how Dark Samus wasn't a more constant presence. After the intro, she stays away as you only see her essence when you kill the other hunters. I kinda like it this way, it gives her a more menacing presence without blowing their load with her, which I'm sure a lot of you sick fucks would really like to do. And making this game feel a bit too much like it's just retreading from Prime 2. Like yeah, she only had 3 fights in that game, but they're 3 notable fights. They know they've already done that, so in this game they save her for the end, while making sure that you remember she's there. They don't do that with Ridley. God, I mean, he's always been a little bit of a bitch. He's been killed how many times now? But I forgot he even showed up, despite his awesome boss fight at the beginning. Hell, I forgot when I even fought him. I thought it was on Phase, but no, he's in the last seed. He is completely overshadowed by Dark Samus, which is probably a pun, but it's kind of sad. He's never been the head honcho, but he had a presence that's just not here, unfortunately. The most memorable thing he does is when he stays in the air during the last phase of his boss fight, and that's less memorable, more so fucking annoying. Get down here, you coward. But all in all, this game's pretty good. The motion controls never really bog it down. It's very user-friendly. I almost never got lost. I don't think I died at all during my playthrough. I recommend it as a pretty good starting point for the Prime series. Prime Remastered is probably better as it's more readily available and it's on a current system, so it's easy to find. But that doesn't make this any worse of a starting point. And for veterans, it's still a very good Metroid Prime game. I don't like it as much as 1, but I definitely prefer it over 2 and was having a lot of fun with it. I'm genuinely surprised with how good the controls are. In fact, they're so good that they re-released the first 2 Prime games in a combo pack with this one called Metroid Prime Trilogy. That's right, I've sold an ungodly amount of blood for this. These are the new Play Control releases. Japan got them as standalone entries, but we got the whole package with no Play Control branding, along with Prime 3. And honestly, these versions ain't half bad. They've got some minor changes, some small quality of life things like more health pickups, and supposedly Prime 2's bosses are easier, but I've made you guys wait for this video long enough. I don't have another playthrough of Prime 2 in me. I wouldn't say these versions are better than the originals, just different. Sucks that none of them support GameCube controllers though. The Wii has GameCube ports out of the box, so I'd think that'd be a no-brainer and it would make these easily the definitive versions. Playing through the intros again made me realize how nerfed you are at the start of Prime 1. You lose everything but... No, I think you lose everything. Prime 2, you just lose some upgrades like Boost Ball and Bombs, and in Prime 3, even though they had a great opportunity to make you lose abilities, Dark Samus's Blast only actually makes you stronger gameplay-wise. It makes the beginning of Prime 1 a bit jarring to go back to, but I still love you, Prime 1. You are my favorite son, after all. All in all, this is a very good way to end the trilogy. I appreciate the ways that Prime 2 and 3 differ from Prime 1, but that game just hit the bullseye with perfect balancing between classic Metroid and being its own thing. The sequels go way more into being their own thing, which I think is for the best overall. It lets the Prime series stand more on its own, and 3 games with no creative risks probably wouldn't have been as exciting. You have to take risks to keep things exciting and interesting and give each game its own identity, and I think they did a great job with that. All 3 games, despite looking similar due to being basically made on the same hardware, they all stand out from each other. Though it's a shame that, for me at least, those things that make 2 and 3 unique ultimately contribute to me not liking them as much as the original. But I'm sure that for those who do like those changes, they like them a lot, and it's entirely why they consider these games their favorite. It made this a fun marathon where I didn't get sick of what I was doing, and it made for a great trilogy that's caused some substantial negatives in my bank account. But despite having done all of the required reading for Metroid Prime 4, we've still got some extra credit to do, as I didn't count Metroid Other M in my 2D series because, well, obviously it's not 2D, but as far as I can tell it's mainline, so arguably it should have been there. But seeing as how this is the 3D Metroid Marathon, we gotta do it now. And then there's Metroid Prime Federation Force. I did a little bit more research into it, as I realized I should probably do before committing to doing videos. And it's pretty clear that it's not a game really worth playing single player. And the issue with that is that there's no download play for the main campaign. And it's not as expensive as Prime Trilogy, but getting 3 copies would be a pretty big ask. So unless the game gets remastered or we just happen to find 3 copies for me and my friends, I'm just not going to bother with Federation Force. Which ironically is probably why it's so expensive, because no one wanted to bother with it. So, Metroid Other M is the last stop for Metroid until Metroid Prime 4 comes out. Also, and I'll make sure to probably ask this again at the start of the Other M video, but if you know of any Metroid Prime hacks, mods, fan games, anything like that, then feel free to send it my way, as I would love to do another fan games video for Metroid Prime specifically. But the issue is I know basically nothing about Metroid Prime fan games, and I could research it myself, and that might be what I'm doing, but, you know, I'm not going to make any promises over things that might just still all be demos or be pretty unremarkable, so I figured I'd ask since I got all the suggestions for Metroid fan games from the comments, so I'll ask the comments again. Let me know if you know of any good Metroid Prime fan games or mods, hacks that would be worth putting into a compilation video the same way I did for the original Metroid Marathon and the same way I did for the 3D Sonic Marathon. But we've still got bigger fish to fry next time with Metroid Other M. Hopefully I won't keep you waiting too long for that video, but until then I hope you have a good day, beautiful morning, awesome night. If it's your birthday, then happy birthday, and I'll see you next mission.